Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Billy Napier, the Florida Gators, winding down spring practice with their spring game Saturday afternoon. And I think I share a lot of the frustration that I'm sure a lot of Florida Gator fans have when you listen to how the national media talks about this team as they work through spring practice. All anybody wants to talk about is the fact that DJ Lagway is not throwing during spring. And you look, I get it. DJ Lagway is a massive part of this Florida team going into 2025. He's the biggest part of this Florida team going into 2025. I feel like we're letting that storyline distract us from some other really intriguing storylines that have emerged within this program. You have a lot of true freshmen that have come into this program, year one guys that sound like they are going to contribute in meaningful ways going into 2025. And I think just as importantly, you have a lot of young talent on this roster that has seemingly taken a step going into the 2025 year as well. I get DJ Lagway. It's a big name. It's a big story. Don't let that distract us from the other really encouraging parts of Florida as they've worked through spring practice. Now, I want to get into some names to watch during the spring game on Saturday. And I also want to kind of touch on some news that we got late last night with Gregory Smith entering into the transfer portal. Now, Gregory Smith, the Florida fans who've been rocking with the fellas the last couple of years know I was a big fan of this kid when he committed and came to Florida. This is a big, long, juiced up athletic profile that was a phenomenal athlete at the high school ranks that was making the transition to play safety for Florida. I think the future is bright for this kid. Really, wherever he does go, although it stings to lose a young kid on your roster that sounded like he was making noise at points during the practice sessions, got on the football field a decent amount as a freshman. Played almost 50 snaps in that Florida State game at the end of the year. Although that stings, if I'm a Florida fan, man, it fires me up for what this means for Drake Stubbs and Laganza Hayward. Because what I kind of take away from it is, all right, why is Gregory Smith transferring after spring practice? It probably tells you a little bit about how Laganza Hayward and Drake Stubbs are playing in spring practice, and it probably gives you a little bit of an insight in terms of where that depth chart is shaking out for Florida. I like Gregory Smith. It sounds like we should be really excited about Laganza Hayward and Drake Stubbs as two true freshmen coming into this program that can make some noise. And what I love about both of those freshmen, kind of a diversity in skill sets. Drake Stubbs to me just a ball hawking instinctual safety that lives in the back end, that loves to play the football in the air. He's going to create a lot of takeaways during his time at Florida. And then Laganza Hayward, a little bit more of a juiced up, bigger body safety that loves to fire downhill, run the alley, and put his face mask into somebody. You got two really, really, really talented safeties who are young that kind of serve different purposes and have different skill sets, which is what you're looking for with your safeties on the defensive side of the football. Sucks to lose Gregory Smith. Should increase the excitement level for guys like Drake Stubbs and Laganza Hayward. And, maybe with Gregory Smith leaving, because we already talked about it, a little bit thin in the secondary. Wouldn't be surprised if Florida maybe kicks around one more addition in the secondary as that spring transfer portal window opens up. Like we talked about earlier this week, we're not really looking for any starting caliber players. We think that the starting 11 on both sides of the football for Florida should be pretty damn good. We're just making sure we're deep enough to make a run in the SEC and make a run in the college football playoffs. Want to get into some names to watch for this Florida football team during the spring game. Guys that you feel like if they play good football in 2025, kind of elevate this football team. Before we get into it, as always, the Florida fans, appreciate you guys, and I can't wait to break down what we see and what we hear from the spring game Saturday afternoon. The amount of support y'all have shown the boys throughout spring practice means the world. If you guys do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Without further ado, let's get into it. Now, I want to start with, maybe just the storyline here in terms of what I'm most interested in seeing. To me, on defense, it's the linebackers. Yeah, this is, maybe outside of Georgia that I think has a uber talented linebacker room. Florida might have one of the from a raw talent athletic profile standpoint. Florida might have the best one in the country outside of Georgia. And if you are Coach Roberts, who has historically used his linebackers in a lot of creative ways and historically has done a really good job developing linebackers, how do you use all these athletic profiles? And I know not everybody's going to be healthy in this spring game, but I do think we might get a little bit of insight where I look at it and say, Miles Graham, Jaden Robinson, Pup Howard, Aaron Childs, those four players have the opportunity to be some of the best four players on this defense. How do we try to get them all on the football field at the same time? And how do we use them in diverse ways to really let them impact the football game? Look, there are a lot of linebackers that you just can't ask to do that much with. You know, hey, your job is playing off ball linebacker, filling the run, going sideline to sideline, making plays. That's it. When you have the special athletic profiles that Florida has in this linebacker room, and that you have so many of these bodies too, now I'm interested to see, hey, do we maybe play with some three linebacker sets? Do we maybe let a guy like Pup Howard, who is big, long, fast, come off the edge a little bit? Kind of intrigued to see how the personnel shakes out for Florida, specifically with these linebackers. Obviously, with Gregory Smith hitting the portal, all eyes are on Drake Stubbs and Lagonza Hayward, not only in terms of, hey, how are they coming along as freshmen, but, you know, now it kind of sounds like, hey, we're probably going to have to lean on you guys at times in 2025. Are you ready to play as true freshmen? I'll say this, I feel better about them being ready as freshmen that Gregory Smith's transferring out, because I think what Gregory Smith transferring out of the program means is one or both of these safeties kind of passed him up on the depth chart and probably are ready to play in the 2025 year. Asa Turner, just not sure. I know he got his waiver, and now it's like, is he going to play for Florida in the 2025 year or not? I don't think Asa Turner starts for Florida, but it would be a nice, veteran depth piece in the safety where it kind of mitigates our concern about the depth in the safety room going into 2025. Getting into some specific names, it probably starts with Dallas Wilson. From what you're hearing coming out of spring, him and J. Michael Sturdivant could be a force out there on the boundary, specifically working vertically down the field. And I don't think it's crazy to say Dallas Wilson could be the wide receiver one of this offense. How does he look when the bullets get live, so to speak? We're simulating a Saturday college game day, where you're going into the locker room, you're going out for a warm-up, back in the locker room, going out playing. How does he look? We're hearing all the right things in spring. Can he put it together in a spring game? Another freshman that I think is kind of getting underrated here is Jaden Woods. This kid, in his athletic profile, it kind of flew under the radar a little bit. He flipped his commitment from Penn State to Florida late on in the process. And we talked about him. We broke down the commitment when it happened, but there were so many, moving parts, and there was so much momentum during that time with Florida on the recruiting trail, kind of got lost in the wash a little bit. This kid doing some work back on him. He wrestled in the state tournament in Kansas, first place in the state in shot put and discus. He ran a sub 12 in the 100-meter dash. He is explosive. 41-inch vertical, by the way, too. That would have been like the best number in the NFL Combine. This kid, from a pure trait standpoint, I think is special. Is he going to be ready to go year one? That's kind of what we find out during the spring game, where he is coming from the state of Kansas, where it's not like you're playing some big-time high school football there. There are some differences in the position he'll play. Played a lot of off-ball linebacker at high school. Is he ready to contribute in some sort of fashion year one? I think there's a very good chance he can, and we'll kind of find that out during spring. But, so much attention going to the freshman wide receivers. I think we're sleeping a little bit on Jaden Woods. LJ McCray is another interesting one to monitor. And I think year one for him, you kind of knew he was not going to be as highly ranked as he was. It's not a very surprising that year one was kind of quiet, because he was a guy that had all the athletic traits coming out of high school, but really never dominated the high school ranks until his senior year. And so you kind of knew that, all right, one, we got to figure out where we want to play him. Is he going to move inside, or is he going to stay out on the edge? It kind of sounds like he's going to stay out on the edge, although has some of that versatility. Is year two when the light bulb comes on? And if you're a Florida fan, like you love George Gums, you love Tyreek Sapp, you love some of the talent in that edge room. LJ McCray's got as much talent as anybody. And does it sound like LJ McCray's ready to take that step in 2025? And that's kind of where I'm looking at this Florida team and saying, this feels like, all right, we know this team's going to be good. can they be great? Some of these year two guys, can they become not only just role players, but difference makers? Another name I'd probably throw in that list is Dontre Robinson. I don't need Dontre Robinson to be a first team All American in 2025. We have that in Caleb Banks. I think he's one of the best, if not the best, interior defensive lineman in the country going into 2025. For me, Dontre is like, hey, can you be a solid, steady rotational player on this defensive line? Because you look at it, the depth is a little bit of a concern. Dontre Robinson played, 10 to 15 snaps a game as a freshman. He's going to be asked to probably play double that in the sophomore year. Can he do that? And can he provide effective depth for Florida in the middle of the defensive line? And then the last name that I'm kind of fired up to see is Bryce Lovett. It sounds like he bumped out to right tackle in spring. It sounded like he has taken that position and kind of ran with it. Look, we've kind of talked about this storyline. I'll say it again going into the spring game. The Florida fans who've been rocking with the fellas, y'all know that I have been critical, very critical of Billy Napier at times during his Florida Gators tenure. The evaluations at the high school ranks, it sounds like there were not a lot of misses. And now you're going into, year two or year three with some of these guys, and it sounds like Florida likes what they have, especially on the offensive line. I mean, you talk about a guy like Bryce Love, you talk about a guy like Rod Kearney, you talk about a guy like Caden Jones. Some of them were not the most highly ranked offensive linemen in their classes, but from when you read about how the depth's emerging with some of these guys going into year two or year three within the program, man, it sounds like Florida has hit on a lot of these guys at the highest school ranks, Bryce Lovett being one of them. How does he look at right tackle? Very intriguing. Kind of that last spot we got to figure out before we go into 2025. I'm also interested in Fletcher Westfall. Fletcher Westfall, probably that swing tackle, that's that third tackle, could play left, could play right. A lot of fun players to watch coming up in the spring game. I'm fired up. We'll break it down Saturday night. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate you guys, and we'll talk to y'all later. Peace.